to get back at.
But sometimes
Sure,
there's
yeah.
an open space committee or an implementation committee.
Yeah.
You know, making
There
sure
was
that.
one. I don't know what happened.
Yeah, there was an open space. It was a subcommittee of conservation, and then I think what happened with the open space. That happened. I think
Yeah, well,
there were two separate,
When we
two
did the
separate
report,
committees.
that was.
Yeah, and then you guys
the
did the
end of it.
report, and then that was dismantled. So there is no open space committee at all right now. It's basically just conservation, and we're having a hard time just keeping up with the Wetlands Protection Act right now. So I think that falls back on what Bert was saying as far as land management is that we need to get our ducks in a row for that.
I think a lot of it comes down to money in town,
Mhm.
because I'm just speaking from Park and Rec. I know our budget is next to nothing.
Mhm.
And just even the mowing at Wally Park and the rail trail, we have enough to keep up with that, but for major expenses, redoing fields and that kind of thing. And with the rail trail, we would depend a lot on Pete Heap's group, the Friends of the Rail Trail, who assist in over the years, like everything from paying for tree removal, which should be a town job, and it finally is. But doing that, putting markers up, which will be going up, granite markers on the trail in the springtime. And anything else that we need done that we don't have money in the budget to do. I mean, this year we're getting trees taken down sometime in the next month and a lot of dead limbs, but I mean, that was basically 3 years ago to the finance committee to get money for that.
Mm.
So it's just a lack of money, and then a lack of just people to do these kind of things, like Dave McWilliams said. I mean, there's only so many people to go around and do so many things.
Right. Yeah, and then, you know, you were talking about maintenance, and funding for maintenance can be
Mhm.
challenging.
Mhm.
With a
Yes.
lot of grant money out there for maintenance.
You have a volunteer group that does your things, or, yeah.
Well, you bring up a good point, right? There, we all know there's grant money out there. I don't think we're very versed in grant writing.
Yeah.
You know, so I think maybe having somebody in the town that could be a grant writer across committees and departments that could work with all of the people in town that are eligible for grants to go ahead and do the grant writing on those. Because there's a technique to it. It's a speciality, and you know, I can tell you, I don't have it, but I would love to take their money, you know?
Yeah. Is there someone on staff now who could take on
I
the
don't
role, or
think
this
there
is
is
someone
a
you'd have to
ton. I
hire?
brought that up
I don't-
before. I mean, even because rail trails have a ton of grant things, but it's pretty specific. I mean, you basically, I'm not completely computer savvy as far as mapping out things and taking pictures and sending everything in. And then dealing with the finance committee to get money up front, and it's just a lot of work. I mean, you know, there's only so much time to do so many things.
Right.
Little bit of an aside, we had a farmers forum about a month ago, and that's one of the issues, or one of the things that came up was, you know, help with grant writing for the farmers. And so we're working with the
Mm.
library to try to set up some grant writing workshops. TBD, but you know, we're working on it.
I
Let
think
us
that
know.
would be money well spent with the town to have a grant writer. I mean, not just for open spaces and Park and Rec, but anything else that's out there.
I'm not sure, but I'm sorry, I got to interrupt you twice. I gotta believe there's professional grant writers out there who would do it for a percentage, you know. 5% of the grant or something. I don't know.
I was making a joke that that's part of the operating model, for at least a portion of PVPC, right? That they, at least in other capacities, I know I get assistance, in some of the applications that we put forth.
Through their organization.
Yes, and sometimes it ties into ongoing work that we already have going on.
Right, yeah, we can do
It's
some. There
Right,
has to
it's
be
not
a way of funding us for doing it.
Yes,
Sure,
that's
but-
the compensation has to be part of the picture.
Right.
But do you get notified about grants being out there, or you have to search them out and start from that? That's what you
It's
do.
one of those things, I suppose, once you're part of,
Network.
It's like, I don't know, giving your phone number to Target or something like that. Well, they're going to, text you and email you, whatever else, right? And so once you're inside that sort of network, then you find out about it, but identifying those opportunities can be challenging. I don't mean to just except.
Yeah, no. I mean, PVPC knows of some, but like, yeah, if you're on like the Mass Land, I don't know if you get emails from them. They will have a section of grants, upcoming grants.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, I hear this from a lot of towns. When I work on open space plans with them, oh, we need a grant writer, and I'm not, I don't know if there's a lot of freelancers out there that,
Right.
Like you said, could do it,
It's kind of a guess.
but yeah,
They gotta be out there. I'm guessing.
Yeah.
I think, I don't know.
Or I wanted to add for this question of important open space and recreation issues in Southwick. I agree with what everyone has said, but I think taking a step back, there's also kind of an existential question in terms of where Southwick is at now. And we've discussed this at our last master plan meeting, when we were trying to define a mission statement. And there were some differing views in terms of how we define ourselves as a country community, a rural community. And we're looking at this in the backdrop of the master plan results, or rather the survey results for the master plan, as well as two community visioning sessions that we had in the fall, where in both scenarios, both the community visioning sessions as well as the master plan survey results, there was overwhelming support to have the community embrace agricultural businesses and agriculture as a mainstay, but also as a form of economy and as a way of also retaining the town's nature, heritage. And I mean, that can go in a few different directions, obviously. And again, the survey results had a little bit of everything, but the majorities are very clear, both for the survey and the community visioning sessions in terms of prioritizing open space, recreational space, agricultural space. But the reality is that there is developmental pressure. So trying to balance that, but having a clear strategy, but also being clear in terms of what our identity is going into the next 20 years is important, because even at this master plan meeting last week, you had some people on there who were mentioning terms like bedroom community. And I mean, a bedroom community is vastly different from a rural community. And the question of as to whether we were still considered a rural community is really important as well. So I think until we clearly kind of can define an identity for Southwick, and obviously not everyone's always going to be on board and say that's exactly what I want. But I'm seeing the crossroads emerging more and more in this town. And unless we kind of have a dialogue about that, I can see the town being developed in ways that really does not align with what some people envision for the town's future in terms of sustainability, in terms of our heritage, in terms of our history, our environmental protection, and then what some people see as progress. And I think there is a way to find a middle ground, but I don't think we have, as a community, found that. And I think that's one of the biggest issues, because until we kind of have that vision, you're not going to get the support municipally or statewide or all of these other mechanisms everyone's discussing that we're lacking, because no one's kind of on the same wavelength now or on the same page. There's a lot of kind of differing opinions in terms of who we are now and where we're going to be. And that to me is like, I think the biggest issue. Once we have that, we may be able to mobilize all of these other things.
interesting point.
I concur.
Pardon?
I concur.
I mean, I noticed you do have a number of APR properties in town. Are there farms that you think are endangered?
Yes.
Economically endangered because they're not, or that they might sell for developments?
Absolutely. There's
Yeah.
one downtown from here, about a mile, I don't know, less than a mile down the road from here. That was kind of the site of a lot of controversy back in 2021. I mean, that's the probably most prominent site, but being on the Agricultural Commission and having worked with a few farmers through the APR process, and that is not necessarily the most adequate arrangement for all farmers. And that's where there's a lot of possibility of losing farmland. It's a tedious process.
Yeah.
The monies aren't always there. They have developers knocking at their door. We've seen this. We have examples right now where there's construction going on this instant where the farmers had the desire to conserve, but that just wasn't a good enough mechanism for them, and there were no other options. The town could really offer no other options, so those places are lost now forever.
Part of that is timing too,
Yeah,
right? You know, I think from a funding standpoint, some of the avenues we were looking to go to use to procure some of those properties. You have to wait to go through town meeting, right? And if it's something comes up in June, now you've got 11 months till town meeting and you're asking a resident to hold on to their property for 11 months. Right? So we're just not poised to react quickly at this time to take on properties that may become available, which
Right.
there's certain conversations going on to maybe how can we address that, but right now we don't have that availability to just act quickly.
Are you talking about properties that are coming out of 61A?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Or even just, but actually, most of the 61A properties coming up.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're saying it's less a matter of the town having the funding to purchase those properties and more about just the process and the time?
So it's
both?
multi-layered. So it's the timing, it's the process, and part of it is the appetite, right? And I don't think we're any different than a lot of communities. Some people want it, some people don't. So there's that internal dialogue that has to happen. But it's the availability to react quickly. You know, if I'm a homeowner or a property owner and I'm looking to divest myself from, life-changing money for me and my family, I don't think I have the patience to sit there and wait 11 months for somebody to step up and say, yeah, if I've got somebody knocking on my door offering me, untold sums for a piece of property, I want that money.
Right. Yeah.
And, and again, I don't think Southwick's much different than a lot of communities. We don't have,
It's happening everywhere.
a ton of money just sitting around waiting to spend, but we have to figure out a way to go about doing it. I think a little bit more expediently than we're doing it right now. Is that a good word?
We also see in town is what you referred to, there's a family dynamic that occurs that goes across the generations. Where someone that may have personal investment in their property being agriculture. I'm aware of one at Hookham Road that's about 50 to 60 acres. That's now for sale, and previously the family wanted to keep it as woodland and farmland. And now the people that wanted to keep it that way have died off, and you've got a family of 3 or 4 people. Some of them want the cash that they can see from it, and others want to keep the family tradition and keeping that land in the state it's in. So when you see a lot of cash potential, the signs go up for sale, looking for a buyer, because as you say, the town isn't equipped to act fast enough to say, okay, well, we can get a certain amount of money from that or whatever.
I think part of that's education too, because you can have both if
Right.
you're educated on how you can have both. I
Mhm.
just don't think a lot of people have that kind of education, how they can utilize their land to bring in revenue without having to turn it over to a developer. And we've talked on the Conservation Commission about how do we do a better job of educating, and with Agricultural Commission, how do we educate people on what their opportunities and options are for their properties. And I think, our goal is to be, I think, better at explaining that and bringing in the right people to talk to the landowners. But then again, it's getting the landowners in the room to listen to us. I mean, that's part of the issue too, is
Right.
how do we get them to want to partake?
Yeah, that's what I was gonna ask, if there's any outreach to landowners of properties who you either know might be thinking of selling, or they have particularly valuable properties ecologically or
I think we're
agriculturally.
trying to get better.
We're trying to get there.
Mhm.
Yeah, again, there's limited person power, like you don't all have the time to just do all this outreach, I'm sure. I think there's resources out there for doing this kind of thing also.
There's educational programs that go on, I think,
Yeah,
a lot of times. So there was actually just Bureau of the Mass Land Bank, I think just did some training on this just a couple of weeks ago, but I don't think we got it out quickly enough to our constituents in the town to try and rally people to get behind it and sit through the training. But I know it's available.
Should we go on to the next question? Anyone? No. So what are some of Southwick's strengths and accomplishments related to open space protection and active or passive recreation resources? What are some of the things that you have been able to do?
Well, we happen to have one person in town who has quite a bit of money who's committed to open space. And as long as that person stays alive, we'll probably hold our own. He owns Wally Computer.
Okay, so he's donated a lot for,
But it's also a concern because who
Yeah.
knows if the
Right.
younger family members would want to keep that tradition alive.
Mhm.
The man is in his 70s.
So are there some really, great, grant land protection, purchases that have been done, or I know the rail trail's been a big
For
success.
sure.
Yeah, with
Yeah.
Mr. Wally, he built the park and donated it to the town, and he still, if there's major things come up, he still funds quite a few different things along the way. But then again, just the long-term maintenance, like day-to-day type thing is kind of a expense to the town, or just trying to keep up with it. The rail trail is, we don't have a huge budget, but it's always worked, I mean, for what we have to do. But, I
It's
mean,
very busy too. I mean, it
yeah,
wasn't frivolous money. I mean, that gets a lot of use. That was a great investment.
There are over 200,000 people a year that use that trail. We've done trail counts and it's known far and wide. Actually, it gets people from New York City
Really?
come up here to come and ride that
a
trail.
lot of people from,
All of
Connecticut,
Western
all over
Massachusetts, Connecticut. And truth be told, though, the Friends of the Rail Trail, we raise about $3,000 to $5,000 a year typically to help support the trail. But we as an organization are aging up, unfortunately,
Mm.
and we're not seeing other people coming along.
but I mean, we finally gotten the trail. I mean, I've been on Park and Rec for 5 or 6 years now, but when I started, basically, if a tree fell, I'd get a phone call. Like, it's gotta be cleared up, and I'm like, this doesn't happen everywhere else. I mean, I complained to the selectmen for years about that, and it's been within the last year, we finally have a full-time maintenance guy that's, other than doing the town hall maintenance and the buildings, he also oversees that. But it's still, I mean, like, just little odds and end things. I mean, myself and the friends group will go out there and cut things or get rid of saplings and all the odds and end things, and try to get the DPW to do certain things, which is kind of a push to get that kind of thing done, but it's still kind of a hodgepodge for the most part. It's getting better, but it's not 100% there.
Mhm.
That's how I look at it.
The North Pond was a big success. I mean, I know there's questions in terms of how to best manage it, referring back to the previous question. And kind of establishing a baseline of how you can do that in a sustainable way, and keep up with the property. But in terms of what that represents and the people power that also took in the organization, it really showed that Southwick as a community, people came together for that in a really remarkable way, and it kind of showed some cohesion in a way that I hadn't seen before in the town, having grown up in this town. And then we saw that again, and I'd say this is another strength of the town in terms of kind of civic engagement. Summer 2021, when that property further down on this road on 202 was in question, in terms of Carvana coming in, possibly and developing that. So-
You've heard of that?
That's the civic data desire master plan.
Right. I mean, the civic engagement that happened, and again, you may have kind of, if you were to interview that pool of people who didn't want to see that happen for various reasons, you'd get that various reasons, various different rationales as to why they didn't want to see that happen in their town. But what we did see by and large was an appreciation for that farmland. A lot of people mentioned, they had grown up with that being farmed. They appreciated the tobacco farms. They appreciated open space in the center of the town. So a few different angles. Some people just thought it didn't make economic sense. They didn't like how the process had been conducted. Again, myriad reasons, but the fact is that people kind of rallied together, and I think there's something to be said about that being channeled into something constructive in terms of kind of long-term conservation, open space and recreation, because clearly the appetite is there. It's when people feel most threatened that they may speak up. And I think that's a pretty common human behavior. When you feel threatened, you kind of speak up. Otherwise, it's kind of hard to get engaged day to day. I mean, a few of us do it, but it's not for everybody. And I get that. It's totally understandable. But it showed to me that Southwick does have that appreciation on some level, at least, of getting engaged and speaking up, whether it's for North Pond, Carvana, and coming out.
What about the lakes? Would you say in
Well, I
terms of
think-
strengths and accomplishments?
Yeah, I mean, well, I think just piggybacking off what Marissa just said, I mean, saving the North Pond property was just, a tremendous accomplishment that this town really was able to achieve, because it was really down to the wire, really, that it wasn't going to happen. And it was, 10, 12 years or so in the making of people advocating and trying to fundraise and trying to get all the pieces to come together. Some money was provided by community preservation. Some monies were provided through Mass Fish and Game, and the ability to preserve that property allowed it to connect to all the other acreage, which makes it one of the largest preserved areas of grassland, in New England, and home to endangered species. And it just provided not just like that one piece of property, but what it did overall for open space and recreation was really huge. But that gave us, almost 3,000 feet of shoreline around the lakes that were protected, and to not have homes built on those with runoff and things like that was a big deal for the lakes, and certainly aesthetically and for the recreation purpose, but environmentally as well. So kind of like all of those pieces brings people into the town for recreation. But as was said before, it's a lot to maintain. It's a baby project, really. So we're still trying to figure that out, and all the town committees are trying to work together to determine how to do that best, so that people, when they're utilizing that property, they're doing it in a way that's respectful, and that's best for the preservation of the property, but still getting the recreational enjoyment out of it. So there's a lot to happen, still coming forward with that, but that process in motion, it's going to be quick, certainly. But that was huge for the lakes. The town also very strongly supported a treatment for keeping the cyanobacteria at bay. That was an $800,000 project that was funded out of community preservation funds, because if that were not to happen, we were having so many frequent algae blooms, and that needed to be treated with, I'm going to say the wrong term, copper sulfate, is it? That, we don't want to have a lot of that in a body of water that sits over an aquifer. Over time, it's just spot treating. So, it's band-aiding approach. And so to be able to have the alum treatment where we're going to get a couple of decades of use out of that to keep the muck sealed in down at the bottom and not have a feeding source for the bacteria was a really big deal. And then now our lake management committee is working with the Army Corps of Engineers and the federal government to look at dredging plan of the outlets. We have 2 outlets coming out of the lake. One of them is completely non-functional. And then the other one is limping along, shall we say, extremely shallow, clogs frequently. Big rains bring backups, which brings the phosphates back into the lake. So that is a huge problem. And Congamon is a 14,000-year-old glacial pond. So if you imagine what your yard looks like after the fall and all the leaves are all there, well, all that's falling in the lake, it's all down under there. Everything's rotting and decaying. And it's just created a lot of shallow spots and a lot of that muck, and it's a lot of problems. So to be able to maybe have that dredging project go through, and we're talking about millions and millions of dollars, would be the most significant thing ever to happen for the lakes. So right now we're advocating with the US Environmental Protection Agency to try to get the bathymetric mapping done of the lake so we can really target the where things need to be done in terms of possible dredging of shallow areas into the canals and the brook. So those are really huge pieces of projects that, the town has embarked upon. So many thousands and thousands of dollars are spent, on the lakes and the preservation of the lakes. It's well worth it, again, from, an environmental perspective as well as the recreational perspective. And, COVID taught us a lot of things, that's for darn sure. Definitely taught us how important the lake was. We look out and there would just be, you couldn't do anything else. Everybody got out in their boats and got out on the lake. But then that presents a problem too, because then, it's very, very, very overcrowded body of water. And so there's a lot to be done with management of that and safety too. So, yeah, I think I'm very proud of Southwick for stepping up and accomplishing some really, really major actions in health and protection of lakes, in recent years.
Awesome. Thanks. Is that the North Pond property? Is that where the community gardens are?
No.
So
Stopanowski.
That's completely separate.
Yeah.
Okay.
other side of
Yeah, so Sofanowski is this
Okay.
parcel right here,
Oh, okay.
and the North Pond. Oh my gosh, everything's am I getting
you're
that?
right.
Okay,
Yeah,
right there.
right
That's the North.
Oh,
property.
okay. Right. So that's basically, it's a conservation area with like trails.
Yes.
Yes.
Mhm.
The trails are still being, it's all being worked out and everything to do with Dave McWilliams and crew are all working hard on that and working with Cub Scouts. And again, we've had cleanup on that property. It used to be cottages and everybody kind of just dumped stuff out on the property, that glass and appliances and whatnot. And so we brought dump trucks full of stuff off of that property through Cub Scouts, conservation, community preservation, and just, general citizens of Save North Pond, Citizens Restoring Condamon, like the town DPW, John Wally sent trucks and mules and things, and everybody just,
Mules.
it was mind blowing
Yeah.
how much.
Not the kind of mules you're thinking about. Yeah. John Deere,
Like it mules.
instead of 4 legs, 6 wheels.
I mean, it could happen
know
in
the word.
Southwick.
Yeah. But going back on Sofanowski, right? So when we were talking about targeting properties, so we're kind of understanding that there's a farmer that has property kind of surrounding the Sofanowski land
Okay.
that he may be looking to sell. And, when we're talking about targeting properties, that's something that would be, benefit the Sofanowski property to continue to grow that corridor. And there's also abutting properties that are unbuildable anyways, which make nice wildlife habitat that are adjacent to it. So it's just going to continue to build this nice corridor, actually coming all the way up from Connecticut up through that area. So that's a valuable piece of property that, the town should seriously think about looking to.
He called, by the way. You need to call him back.
Okay.
I'm not handling that.
Okay.
I'm not suave enough.
Okay, that's fine.
Alright.
But yeah, so I mean, it's like we have this great piece of property that's a foothold
Mhm.
that gives us an opportunity to expand the impact of that biodiversity in that area. Again, we just have to be smart about what we're looking for.
Right. All right, so the next question, you've already touched on a lot of these things, but the question is, what are the primary concerns and challenges for Southwick's open space and recreational resources? So I know we've already discussed some of your major concerns. Being able to protect the land, being able to purchase the land in a timely way. Agriculture, protecting agriculture, economic pressures, development pressures, were some of the things you talked about. Funding. What else? Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you would consider a primary concern or challenge?
I think a lack of creativity in terms of the economic development that we want to see in town.
Mhm.
I think we're still operating the model that, inviting certain kinds of businesses is maybe the only way to scale up economically in terms of our tax revenue base. But I think there is totally a way to develop the economy of Southwick in a way that will make it viable to the next 20 years, trying to think about the next 20 years. That's the whole point of this master plan process, is to think about where we'll be in 20, 40 years. I think just keeping an eye on different kinds of businesses and trying to think of Southwick within the footprint that it has maybe now of being semi-rural or wherever, whatever people want to define it as. And just thinking about different kinds of businesses that can come here that don't necessarily have to take away those open space corridors or take away farmland. I mean, we're in the 21st century now in terms of technology and remote working. And I think the pandemic really highlighted how you don't need to be in an urban hub to have progress economically, how you don't need to be in a city to kind of be engaged with the rest of the global economy. Those days are done. You know, you saw, if anything, an exodus of young people to rural areas across the US, across Europe. Probably initially just fleeing like pandemic-ridden cities, but kind of bringing those skill sets there and kind of developing new business models, services models that don't necessarily need to be a manufacturing plant. I mean, that's fine, but that's not the only kind of business we need to pursue in town in terms of trying to romance potential companies to come and set up shop here. Maybe some of that is okay, and finding a balance, I think, will be necessary going forward into the future and being realistic about that. But I think also just creative thinking in terms of what other businesses exist out there now that could have an impact economically, but not necessarily have the physical footprint or environmental footprint in town in terms of water usage, carbon emissions, taking away space, that could help us flourish. I think it is possible. And I would like to see kind of more of that discussion done in terms of maybe Southwick becoming a different kind of hub. I mean, even on the topic of agriculture, we have a lot of agricultural businesses here in town that are traditional farm models. They probably are going to have to adapt in the next decade, either due to climate change or due to other factors economically, the fact that they can't get people to work at the farms for the same price anymore in terms of wages. So what does that mean in terms of agricultural practices? Does that mean shifting to hydroponics, aeroponics, different technologies? So I think sky's the limit in terms of new businesses that are emerging in the role of technology. I think hybrids of what we see today are going to maybe be, the way forward, but I'm fearful that they won't be embraced by the town. And that, as someone in my 30s, scares me, because then I'm thinking long-term, like, what's this place going to be like economically in 20 years' time? If I have kids now, I mean, is it going to be viable in terms of supporting itself?
They're an economic development director.
Yes.
Is there any agritourism or ecotourism that you would say? I mean, other than the rail trail, I mean, obviously pulling in a lot of people in the lakes. I mean, do any of the farms do
I
anything?
think they could probably do a little bit more, like if you look to Granby, Connecticut, what they do with their farms and have different days when all the farms in town are open and promote different things. I mean, that's a big thing a couple times a year. I think that would definitely work here. But I think like Marissa said, I know I mispronounced your name. I
Oh,
can't
it's
roll
all
my
good,
R's.
Marissa, Marisa, whatever.
But I think it's just like businesses that would fit in well with the town. Like, I'm not a marijuana smoker, but I think the grow places and even the dispensaries. I mean, we had another vote on that, and it looks like they're still leaning against dispensaries. But I mean, from an economic standpoint, I think we missed a vote on that 3 years ago, being right on the Connecticut state line and being able to put a 3% surcharge on it. It would have been a fortune. I mean, it's a low impact business. You don't have people going there and causing brawls and getting arrested. I mean, nobody wants to get arrested at a dispensary, but I think those type of things would fit in good for the town. And we kind of missed the boat on that. And I think that a low impact business like having a package store, it's not going to cause any more trouble than that. I mean, depending how you agree with it or don't agree with it, but I think that would fit in with the town perfectly. And even grow places for that. I mean, it's not all indoor hydroponic growing for that, but I mean, I think that would be a good fit for the town. Just my opinion.
Well, dispensaries would certainly help out the local restaurants too.
It's possible.
So, win-win.
We did have that one farm that really was, that just closed Meadowview, you know, but they did a lot more than just, you know, sale of plants and things
Mhm.
like that. They had hay rides and events for kids in the fall and things like that, but there's not, you know, a ton of them.
There used to be a couple of corn mazes in town and they've, Meadowview had one. There was the one right over by the schools on,
Tell a breeze ran.
Yeah.
out, yeah.
that-
They were vandalized.
what kind of vandalization?
They were going in at night and destroying the mazes, they were destroying everything they left on site, they were destroying the little hut, you know.
That's too bad.
Hey, picking up on Dave's point, I have to make our first public announcement. The Agriculture Commission met last night at this table to plan our first ever open farm day, which is going to be Sunday, August 20th. So mark your calendars. There's a lot more to be worked out, but we're going to give it a try.
That's where people can go to all the different
Yeah,
farms.
yeah.
and visit. Cool.
Like a farm crawl?
Yeah,
Farm problem, it's, hey, yeah.
exactly.
Awesome.
We didn't think about including the breweries, but maybe.
Yeah.
That's even 60, there you go.
Barley and hops, I mean, come on, it's very agricultural.
Okay. There aren't anything, other comments on concerns and challenges. You'll have other options though, other times you can.
Just thought of one more thing from our
Okay.
farm forum that I'd like to contribute to that point. Two quick points, something the farmers had mentioned, in terms of, you know, an impediment to maintaining their land on top of kind of development encroaching and the pressure to develop, sell. And kind of the lack currently of like accessible resources for conservation of farmland. Was also the tax rate and kind of, you know, thinking of them as a local business within a certain scale and having maybe a variable tax rate. You know, that was just something that the farmers had mentioned. And obviously then another thing a farmer had mentioned as well at this forum was, in terms of zoning. And, you know, this was a farmer that happened to be, threatened or felt threatened by a development that was happening across the street from them. So their farm was an APR, but then a whole development across the street where there used to be a farm was being developed or is being developed currently. And they just were kind of struck by the whole density question. And we're thinking, well, why can't Southwick possibly change to like a 3 acre minimum? And, you know, she kind of, that was her way of rationalizing in her mind in terms of like boundary of spaces and lots being sold for development. You know, okay, we're going to have people coming into town. We have to like find that balance with like building some housing, but maybe if it were less dense, it wouldn't necessarily impede the sense of like open space and farmland that she's worked hard to maintain for her side of the street. And it would be kind of a balancing act. It's just, I mean, something to consider going forward when we kind of think about zoning in the future and kind of, you know, what R40 means 20 years from now, if we do have a higher population or lower population, if maybe that can be changed in some areas.
But that to me kind of goes counter to part of the open space results that we've gotten, affordable housing for young people, right?
Right.
And if you're gonna start throwing 3 acre minimums on there, you're never gonna get the young
Right.
people to stay in this town,
That's gonna
so.
make Southwick more exclusive. I mean, it's
Yeah,
gonna be
yeah, I
more
mean, so
expensive to
it's
build.
really, it's a balancing
It's a
act, I
balance.
mean,
Yeah.
you wanna stay rural, but. The young people in this town are leaving in droves because there's really nothing here to keep them. There's not housing that's affordable, there's not activities in this town that they're really, you know, we're gonna keep them here, so. How do we mix the two? How do we maintain who we are? But yet grow to a point where it's a desirable place for people to want to stay and move to, ideally.
What
Right.
about open space development model with dense, kind of more dense
We have.
developments, but having preserved land along with that? Has the town done anything?
Yeah, we
with
have that. We
Okay.
have
'Cause
some.
A lot of towns have that in place, but nobody ever actually builds anything
Yeah,
using that model.
no, we have quite a few of those.
Yeah, flexible
Yeah.
subdivision, right?
To build on
Say
Melissa's point too about,
But it's for the subdivision.
Right.
Right.
Yes.
open
space Okay.
for the subdivision itself.
to build on Melissa's point too about looking to the future in terms of future models. I'm an old man, and I think like an old man. And so I credit Marissa for her age and think in terms of her forward thinking. And that is that one of the things that the town is currently considering is going with fiber optics. We have, I mean, I have cable that's very, very expensive. So I have internet access, but if we're going to be looking at a future economy, we need to support that with the appropriate utilities.
Right.
Which I guess is in the planning stages and jumped one hurdle, but it's something that the town is going to need to support, is create the infrastructure to allow to the town to go into that model that is the future.
That could be a selling point for businesses to
It
come to
absolutely
town,
could
you
be,
know, if you
certainly.
have your own fiber optics,
Yeah.
that's huge, right?
And 20 years from now, it might be obsolete, but we have to work in between too.
Has the town actually been losing population or just losing younger?
Both. I
people?
believe there's a population decline over the last 10 years.
Mhm.
And I think the demographics have shown that we're an aging population. Right.
I think very much at home.
A lot
at
of
my
salt.
age.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's difficult.
Yeah, which, everything kind of needs to regenerate itself, but if we're not keeping the young people that we have or drawing young people in, where's the future of the town?
Mhm.
It's curious because there's been a lot of development over the past, I'll say 20 years, new houses going up.
Mm.
And yet the town stays at about 9,500 population, 9,800, or, so there's people moving in, but there must be also people moving out.
We're moving in with less kids.
Less
Less
Than
kids.
Yeah.
younger kids moving out to
Yeah.
other places to work.
Not exactly sure what explains that, but
I mean, how are resources for families and, kids? I mean, well, you're part of a regional school district. Is there any reason why people with kids wouldn't be moving here?
We have a rec center and we have the park and recs. So, there are activities for, kids to do. There's various parks. I know Park and Rec is looking to expand on the park there's thought of a spray park and talks of a skate park and pickleball and trying to make the parks more attractive to people to go and spend time at it. My kids are older, so what other things there are in town for the kids? I mean, really, it's either Park and Recs or
For school-based
Direct center.
things, but I think
Yeah.
there's less kids overall now than there was,
Sure.
say, 10 to 15, 20 years ago.
And Park and Rec runs programs, there's teams and there's. or not really?
We don't run a lot, but there's a separate, the rec center that runs a lot of programs, like all the
Okay.
sports
private group.
year round. It's a private group.
Okay, right.
Not affiliated with the rec center, but they do a lot of programs like before school and after school things too. And the rec center also runs programs, but a lot of our programs are geared more towards older. I mean, we're just starting to do kid-based programs the last couple of years, but more geared towards the older population in town.
Right, which makes sense.
Yeah.
Because if that's,
Yeah, there's a town
demographic.
beach.
Yeah.
But even if you go to the town beach on a 95-degree day, there's hardly anybody there. I mean, it's not, I don't think it gets used as much as it should. And I think maybe part of that is, I don't think we advertise it as much as we should to the residents of town.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great resource.
Yeah.
All right, so the next question was, and again, we touched on a lot of this, but What are the main goals of the town and primary stakeholders to protect and improve the open space and recreational resources, and what actions are necessary to achieve those goals? So
Pregnant silence here.
I know
I
that's
think you,
broad.
we hit on.
We
most
hit
of
it, yeah, we have
Yeah.
hit on a lot of this stuff. Financial money. Support financially for maintenance of what we already have. That's a big one.
anything that has, sorry.
Marissa's point earlier, I don't know if we know what our goals are.
Hmm.
You know, who we are and where we're going. All of this master plan process will help with that.
And I'm hopeful too that the implementation of the master plan, assuming that we manage to reach some cohesion and get a plan going that kind of manages to encompass whatever it will encompass as we go through the process. That the implementation can be made public. I think there is really a disconnect in terms of what happens at the planning board level or town hall level, and that being conveyed in an accessible, understandable way to the townspeople. I think the good thing about this master plan process is that it has asked for a lot of public input in a way that I don't remember town hall kind of engaging with before. So I, commend the whole process for that and commend everybody who's gotten involved from the public side. But I think translating that is going to be, to answer that question, what are the actions necessary for me, making sure that the implementation is done in a way that doesn't feel disconnected from the master plan and the data that people provided throughout the survey, these visioning sessions, all the other input we've gotten, so that people can tangibly see, okay, it is being put into action. I think there's something to be said about that when people have engaged active citizenship in something and they see that it, it turns into a tangible outcome. So I don't know how, I'm sure your group will give us some pointers in terms of implementation, but not just implementation, but implementation with some visibility and access for the public. So that they kind of also understand, all right, we're all on the same page on this. Town hall's working on this. Your input was important in this. This is where we're going.
A good point.
I think that's a good point. I think the biggest thing is, we've had a lot of people involved in this and come to our open meetings, but still as a percentage of the town, it's still very, very low. I think a big thing is getting more people in town involved in different things. Even elections every year, when they come up, you could run anybody and you're gonna win, basically, because. No offense.
Example over here.
Yeah, I'm only saying that because I ran against nobody last year, and I wasn't even on the ballot, and I ended up getting back on the right side. That's why I say that, nothing personal. But there should be, I think you've got to get the town a little more involved, because I wouldn't have cared if I had 2 people running against me. That would have been fine. I think it should just be more people that feel like, yeah, I want to be involved. I want to do this. But there's not. There's like,
Challenge.
whatever you do in town, seems like the certain same people that are involved in everything all the time.
Was there good participation in the survey?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was,
10%
was-
of the town.
yeah, well over 900.
Just went to the transfer
Yeah, which
station.
is good, but for the whole population.
What's
of the
that?
Town, it's still,
It was, I still have some issues with the demographics of the respondents, when well over 50% of the respondents are well over 50 years old. We're talking about a plan that's supposed to be in place for 2040. Well, the people that are going to be most impacted didn't step up, which I guess that's kind of on them. But it's a shame. It's a shame when we're trying to chart out our future and our future doesn't even want to be part of the process.
Right.
I don't think there's a lot of future necessarily in Southwick either. If we're talking about younger people, right? Talking about the proportions, maybe we got as much as we're going to get from that.
Yeah, which
demographic, 'cause We
is-
don't have a lot of young people in
Yeah.
Southwick.
Which is again disappointing,
It
you
is
know,
disappointing, I agree,
because it's really more about them
yeah,
and you.
well, I don't know,
Not
I'm aging out.
Sometimes the school is kind of a hub of community. I mean, does it feel like the schools provide any, I don't know, way of getting people engaged and involved?
I thought they did when my kids went there, but it's been probably 15 years since both of them have been done, so I'm not really sure at this point. And I know it's probably been tough the last 2 or 3 years, just trying to have a normal thing going on, but I mean, now things start back up again. I'm not really sure what the schools are like.
I'll mention one thing, John Goddard here has facilitated a listening session, which I believe is March 9th. No,
Not that, that was suggested date, it's going to be a different. suggested
Oh.
date.
well, anyway, sometime in
We can say that.
March. We'll be getting together with high school and junior high school age folks. John helped me.
Oh, you're doing great.
Anyway, we're gonna try it, Dave, to get a little more input.
Yeah, I mean,
From those folks.
Agreed. And you know what? You kind of have a captive audience. Is it still the intention to go there
Yes.
for this? Right, so now you're working in their environment, which is better than asking them to come.
Probably.
Yeah, good idea.
I guess not what,
Before we leave goals, you wanna go over that?
Oh.
or-
yeah, I mean, we could, just since we're talking about goals, would it be helpful to talk about what the goals were from the OSRP? I mean, there were 4 main goals and we talked about all of them to some degree. The first one was maintain the ecological integrity of aquatic ecosystems and provide the quality and quantity of surface and groundwater drinking water supplies. That hasn't come up yet, but I know that aquifer protection was a really big topic.
Yeah.
So I don't know if there's anything more to say about that. And then it also involves the water quality in Congamon lakes.
Which Michelle addressed earlier.
Partially, yeah. I mean, the Lake Management Committee are really the ones that do all of the hard work with the water quality management. They're constantly assessing daily, and having everything monitored. And we have a consultant limnologist to assist them in terms of the short and long range planning for the lakes and, water quality. We have decades of amazing data. Actually, our organization has them come to present usually the second meeting of the year. And they have graphs and they have everything that really shows what they're doing. But I think some of us have also mentioned, and this is going to be under study too, for the amount of salt. Well, today is a perfect example. The amount of salt that's used now for our roads where we had sand and sand salt mixture and are, have moved over to salt and the impact of that on the water quality of the lake. So they're looking at that and, how that, I don't know the technical name for them, but how the stormwater is managed to make sure that there's low impact on the ponds and things like that, are all definite concerns.
For protecting the aquatic habitat by improved culvert replacement projects. There have been some culvert replacement projects already completed. Am I correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, we've done some of that. I think along the lines of like protecting streams and wetlands, like it would be nice to think of like purchasing land, not just for recreation, but for the habitat of, habitat as well as water quality, upstream water quality.
Mhm.
I know up at like the Lupinski area, that's a lot of vernal pools and it's you know, rich in abundance with the rare species that we're trying to protect, and thinking about that, not just up in that area, but throughout Southwick is something at least I'm trying to move towards. So
Is that parcel's not protected?
the
It is.
Lupinski is,
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
it's part of a larger area that goes up into Westfield as well.
Yeah.
But, you know, there's a lot of areas in Southwick. I think there's not a lot of certified vernal pools. And vernal pools are being threatened as well with development. That's one of the main reasons why, you know, they're threatened. So something to think about there.
There's a lot of potential.
There's a lot
Yeah.
of potential, and that's just,
I
you
think
know,
we have 2, maybe 3 certified, right?
3 or something, yeah.
Yeah, I see 3. Yeah, that
Um,
isn't very many
Yeah.
for a town this size. No.
No, I know there's one that it's covered
Oh,
by
there you go.
over there.
4.
Yep. But yeah, protecting the vernal pools, getting them certified so they can be protected, but that's a volunteer thing, so maybe educating on how to certify vernal pools. I know in our next Conservation Commission meeting, I'm gonna ask Conservation if I could potentially certify a vernal pool that I think we found on Sofinowski. So, and after I do that, maybe I could do some public education on how to certify vernal pools on your land, you know, 'cause
Is
you
that
need-
something you can involve high school students with?
yeah.
And we have begun trying to utilize some of the students through like the NHS program. I don't think we got the amount of buy-in we wanted out of our first go through with them,
Which program?
the National Honor Society. And I think because they need volunteer hours, and I think if we can catch them now and get them involved and help educate them and maybe build a little passion on their side, hopefully that's something that stays with them the rest of their lives. So
Yeah.
I think, you know, we'll continue to try and work with that group and see how many of those people we can actually get to work with us on a regular basis.
Yeah. Okay, so goal 2 was permanently protect important open space and ensure conservation areas are appropriately managed for flora and fauna, habitat integrity and resiliency. We have talked about that. Goal 3 is preserve working farms and forests and support of an agricultural way of life in Southwick. And then 4, improve and expand recreational and environmental education opportunities for people of all ages while preserving Southwick's scenic, cultural, and historic character. Continue summer recreation programs, implement trail system in Goose Pond. Manage existing facilities and control non-authorized uses, increase community awareness of conservation areas. Any other comments about any of those?
Is anyone here like a water expert or serve on the water commission? No. The only thing I wanted to say, and I'm not an expert on this, and I also happen to have well water, so I can't speak to it personally or empirically like say anything about it, but having been one of the people on the master plan who helped proof the master plan survey results, one thing that stood out to me as I was proofing that were the numerous comments about drinking water
Mhm.
and the concern of both cost, the banning of drinking water, but also the quality. I mean, I had heard about the banning issue. Obviously, I see the signs go up around town and people get upset that water is being banned. And then obviously cost, that makes sense, like they have to pay for that service. I understand how that can be an impediment or difficult for some people, but one thing that surprised me was the quality. That is something I hadn't heard of before. And again, because maybe I'm not connected to that line, but a lot of people express like a distrust in the quality of water, which surprised me. And what some people also brought up was the irony that, you know, they basically live over an aquifer, but they felt they weren't having access to quality water. Again, I don't really know much about the water infrastructure, but it was something that was notable and frequent enough that I wanted it put into the record, since this is kind of the forum for it.
I'm a victim of that, actually.
Okay, so maybe you can speak to that. I just,
I live in Winfield Circle, which is a over 55 development. Condos of 40 units. And we received notice because we received Springfield water apparently. Because of the situation that's going, it's not all aquifer water in town that we all drink, and they need to supplement with Springfield water. And we received a letter from the town telling us that our water was now contaminated with a carcinogen. Because the Springfield water, due to organic material from wet winters and summers, washing into their reservoir, they had in their system being antiquated over 100 years old, they've had to chlorinate their water. So a combination of the organic materials and the chlorination and the chemicals they use has created a carcinogen in the water, and it's been risen over heights that would it be the FDA? I suppose at any rate, the water quality, the federal water quality folks had said we're at risk. And there was a meeting with the town water folks and consultants from the city of Springfield to describe what was happening. And it's about 3 years off before they can resolve the situation. So we then said, well, how much of the water are we drinking? That's Springfield water. And they said it depends on where you are in town.
Certain parts of town, right?
And where we live in town, where I live, it's 90% Springfield water that we're getting. So it is a concern.
I think it's like the beginning of the line.
Because it's the beginning of the line. And we sold our house a couple of years ago to our daughter who lives on Ed Holcomb Road, who's on a well. So now what we're doing is we're getting gallon jugs of water from my daughter so that we can feel safer in terms of the water we're drinking.
You notice a difference. I'm at the end. I'm down at the bottom of Southwick, and I know when we get Springfield water, I'm like, ugh, man.
Yeah.
And that
I
all
don't like
comes
it.
from Copper Mountain Reservoir, right?
Yeah.
No, well.
We get the
No.
Westfield.
Aquifers here,
Oh, one into Springfield.
yeah. Oh,
Oh.
yeah.
But there are some residents here that do get their drinking water from the aquifer.
Yeah.
And is that a good quality at this point? Do you know?
You know what? I don't know if it's coming from the aquifer or come from Springfield. I just know it doesn't taste anything like it used to taste.
Sometimes it
You
comes
know.
out with foul smell too.
Yes.
Right out of the tap.
Yeah, just for people's education, I mean, we do have an aquifer, but we don't own it solely. We share it
Right.
with West Springfield,
And Westfield as well, right?
who pulls.
Which is interesting. Yeah. And then a number of homes have private wells.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So in terms of protecting the aquifer and protecting, watershed lands, is that something that protecting the,
One concern we have certainly for the lake is the fact that, Southwick put sewer in around the lake, but not everywhere and not in Suffield. And Suffield covers a large portion of the western side of Congamon, South Pond, all of it, and then more than halfway up Middle Pond is all Suffield and sewer lines.
so one goal would be to extend more sewer line.
It would be definitely, and also a better partnership, I think, with their Conservation Commission to follow the type of regulations when construction and clearing, things like that are happening around the lakes. We've gone around and have not seen, silt fences where they needed to be. We've seen very steep banks clear cut, and not having the communication followed, and, with the Southwick Concom is a concern for us.
sewage around the lakes, and then I think this master plan survey results, when we were looking at them by address, certain parts of town were against getting sewage, and I think it makes sense, like there's different environmental factors. It wasn't like a uniform, yes, sewage across town, drinking water across town. I think it really depends on the environmental conditions around, but around the lake, I mean, people concurred with that result that you're saying, that was confirmed by the survey.
Right. Is that actually being planned or no? Like to extend the sewer lines around the lake, do you know?
I think it came up for Southwick to be discussing it with Suffield, but because it's a different town and state. you know,
But even on the Southwick side,
Yeah.
I mean, the last couple of times expanding the sewer lines came up, it wasn't around the lakes. It was down College Highway and through some of the larger developments back here, but it wasn't expanding it around the lake.
Mhm. All right, I mean, I think we've been on the main things, you know, I guess there's just anything that we've left, any other comments or ideas, or I don't know if we wanna open it to.
Sure, this is the right opportunity.
Well, if I could, just an update. So one of the things regarding the open space is concerned, the land for the land for public trust for public land, as well as the National Park Service have been looking at procuring some property here in Southwick as well. And I just got a notification from her today that everything's moving forward. They're hoping for maybe in April, mid-April closing. So that's. Yeah, they're doing, I think, what did she say they're going through right now? We're in final stages of due diligence and we have completed environmental title commitment and it just awaiting the preliminary survey, so. That will hopefully preserve another 60 odd acres.
Okay. Well, that actually gets to number 5, which I didn't ask, was who can the town partner with to help achieve goals like land protection? Is there a local land trust?
Not yet,
Not yet.
Oh, there isn't? Not even like a regional?
yes.
For North Pond, we work with.
Oh,
Franklin Land
Castro, I don't know if
Trust.
they work there.
Franklin Land Trust, we work with for the North Pond property. that's-
Okay.
Yeah, so we've obviously worked with Land Trust, Mass Fish and Wildlife, own the conservation restriction for the North Pond property. Which I think is one of the reasons we're concerned about having a local land trust where we can control the properties in our town as opposed to having people from the state
Mhm.
come in and maintain control. And yeah, now, you know, not only the property that they're looking at for the National Park Service, the one they're looking currently actively trying to procure, but they may want to expand on that. There's properties on either side that they may be looking at to just protect part of what they call the Northeast Trail, which is part of like the Appalachian Trail system.
Is Winding River a land trust?
They're kind of a dysfunctional land
I
trust.
didn't know if they're even still in operation.
They're still chartered, but they're not active. Dysfunctional, a good word?
Yeah.
I think so.
I don't think if
Yeah.
you're Winding River people, it's a good word, but.
No, I think they'd agree.
Well, is there any stirrings? I mean, a possibility of.
Conversations.
Okay. All right, and so anything else? Other comments, other ideas, anything we didn't touch on?
I have one thing that, I'm just sort of kind of puzzling through myself, reading the technical paper and the idea of including golf courses in open space. And for that matter, I mean, I'm an agriculture guy, but even farms, it's not exactly open space, there are not houses there. But a golf course or a farm is not like the rail trail or the North Pond or the, Grand Gorge where you can just go there and use the property.
Right, I mean, they're private.
Yeah,
I guess it's probably that they're also potential open space if they were to close and the town was to be able to purchase some of the property, which has happened in a number of.
right.
towns and cities.
That's what, Sopanowski used to be a farm. for example.
Right, so farm or a golf course, I'm
Yeah,
thinking,
yeah.
like that happened in Northampton, and they've
Hmm.
been able to convert it to conservation. So,
Yeah, okay.
but I see your point. Yeah. It is included even though it's private.
I mean, I think it should be included. I mean, technically it is open space and it adds to vistas. You know,
It is recreation.
yeah,
also,
it's
obviously.
recreation and then, you know, we have less impervious surfaces because it's still open space, it's not built on and. But it does serve some habitat value as well. I know conservation has some properties that aren't accessible. They're like landlocked and stuff, but they're still, you know, open space.
Hmm.
And functions in different ways to benefit the town.
To that point, the ranch is not listed in your table.
Ooh,
The ranch?
The ranch, it's a large golf course on some of the side of the road.
Oh, okay.
And I believe they may have some, reserved land or something around that. I don't know. how-
open
how that-
space.
Yeah, it's conservation restriction land.
Conservation.
On the outskirts,
Yeah, non-golf course, non-residential.
right? Is that part of, from the development side or from the golf course?
From the subdivision.
Yeah, okay.
And we also have a disc golf course in town too, which.
Oh, that's true, right?
Good point. That-
Which is achieving New England recognition, by the way, for
Yeah.
the quality of it.
So.
What does it have a name?
Thank you for bringing that up.
New England Disc Golf Center.
Oh, okay.
My son-in-law asked me to partner.
Yeah, these have become really popular.
What street? I can't think of the name.
It's on John Mason Road.
John Mason Road.
And interesting thing about that is the owner of the property was facing family issues. There were two sisters that had inherited the property as farmland and needed to pay taxes on it. One sister wanted to sell. And the other sister wanted to keep the land. And the one who wanted to keep the land initially was looking at mining very
Taking out a single.
high quality section 5 sand there. It was opposed by the neighborhood, and then she came up with the idea of putting a disc golf center in there instead. So it's attracting folks from around New England.
Which is still opposed by some neighbors.
Yeah, yeah.
The disc golf portion of it is not, however, they didn't want to serve beer there, and a neighbor did oppose that.
They go hand in hand.
They do. And the,
Yeah.
There you go, thank you.
Yeah. You gotta have a balance.
Oh, no, I wasn't. I was.
Well, it's, before we wrap things up, do you want to give the public an opportunity to share any thoughts or comments?
What?
Diana, you see a hand up, this includes being throw up, or speak up when the opportunity is right.
Speak up loud enough so you can record it.
Thank you, Diane Gale. Just, in no particular order, one of the issues that I have faced is I've looked at some of these recent maps or maps in town hall out of curiosity and online. And looked at all the open space and the town owned open space and I look at those and go, where the heck are those? I didn't know they were there. I don't know how to get there. I don't know if there's access. I don't know if they're open to the public, so. You know, I like to market what we have, if we have it, and. We have maps on the town website. But if you go Google what to do in Southwick, you're not gonna hit southwick.org and see that map. So I think we can do a better job of promoting our recreation in open space. I'm curious if Suffield has any obligation to contact Mass state organizations if they're gonna do construction and things, and could we enforce that to protect the lake? One thing that has come out of discussions on some development in town or business expansion in town is navigation on the lake, and that's not something that was actually talked about here specifically. there's been a lot of discussion about the tunnels through the culverts and, you know, maybe that's a discussion with the state, Highway Commission, DPW and Lake Management about widening those culverts to reduce the safety hazards going through there. I know we did Congamon Road a bit ago.
Mhm.
Shame on us for not thinking of that then and making that wider and more navigable.
Definitely.
And then just on the schools and the population, I don't know what the numbers are. I looked it up once, but I don't know what the numbers are by age in town. But not only has the population gone down a little bit, but so has the school population. And those kids that are in school, or what we say, some of the ones that are not in school are because they're going to private schools. They're driving them to other towns. And in those other towns, they may be doing the activities after school there. They're doing traveling teams, they're doing hockey somewhere else, they're doing swim meets somewhere else, they're doing dance somewhere else. So it's probably convenient for them after school. Tagging on to the trip and going somewhere else after school rather than having those activities here. So maybe you want to promote more of those activities, have a community hockey center, have winter ice fishing tournament, you know, things to do. There's things to do here all seasons with our resources that maybe could be organized and keep kids and keep those families wanting to do things here. So that's it.
Thanks.
Royal Cedars, I just wanted to say, I've been coming to this town since 1991 or around in there. I moved up here from South Carolina, and first years I was here, I was over on the wrong side of the lake, I mean, the wrong side of the river, sorry. So, I had the opportunity to move over here in 2008, and it always appealed to me to be in and around South. I mean, you drive into the area and this just appealed to me. You know, we talk about drawn in by the recreation on the lakes and things to do on the lake, just the nature of the town and near the Stead Hills and everything like that, and the overall feel of the town. Say, you know, for myself, this is now my hometown. Some of the recent developments that have come about have been somewhat disturbing. And you know, or some of the things that I'm seeing around are a little bit concerning. I'll say disturbing, I'll say concerning. You know, we talk about growth and all like that. I don't know that growth is always a good thing. I think part of the appeal to the town is the size of the town. And the way it feels when you drive in here. But I do see that our a lot of things around town, a lot of our infrastructures and our facilities and everything like that are getting a lot of pressure on. And you know, I love the work that town is doing around the open spaces and all like that. But just, I'd like to just say from my point of view that sometimes the size is the right size.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You know, and we do things through our master planning and so on and so forth to improve the right size. One of the things that concerns me, you know, is the looking at the spray pool or whatever. has
Spray
been
park?
proposed.
Spray park.
There's maintenance costs that are associated with that aren't insignificant. And it was mentioned before that we're struggling to keep up with some of the things that are here now. So I think we just need to keep that in mind. And that's just wanted to express my feelings there and I still enjoy living.
Thank you.
Well,
Thank you so much.
Yeah, welcome to town.
Belatedly.
Oh, yeah, been here a while.
Southwick.
Yes, yeah.
Southern Massachusetts.
Down in the notch.
Yeah, how do you call it? It's the notch.
Well, it's
Other comments?
Please, please, don't wait for me.
To say, nice job of what you're saying. Sometimes we are the lakeside that, you know, if you look at things, do we really need to make things bigger or can we make things better with what we have? I listened on the way in and I heard you talking about developments and things like that. I think a lot of things that get overlooked for planning developments is what's the cost going to be to the town, the infrastructure? Are we going to need more police department, water usage, schools? What effect is that going to have on the taxpayers who are already here? Do we need that more development in town? Is preserving land more beneficial or detrimental? If we need to look at those things and how to retain the rural feel that we have in town, I think that's what most people want to have. That's why we're here. So to preserve that feel, I think we need to really look at what that means. How do we preserve it in a way that's going to be sustainable for the town to succeed in the future?
I can just piggyback on those two comments, tying it back to the master plan survey results, and sorry to keep mentioning them, but I want to make sure that they are also given, you know, space in this sort of forum. You know, one of the notable results that came out in terms of being a majority, apart from the support for maintaining agricultural land and kind of keeping the town's rural character, was minimal housing development. And I think that we can think about that in a more nuanced way. It doesn't mean that people are against affordable housing. I don't think that's what is being said there at all. I know that we, like, to the point that this gentleman made, a lot of times we think about growth and scale, and we think that if we grow at a certain scale, there will be, you know, more accessibility or availability. That may be true, but I don't think that was what people were pointing to when they said that result overwhelmingly, that they just didn't want more housing, or they put minimal housing, you know, as a point for housing development in Southwick. And I think that kind of highlights the sentiment of a lot of people in town. A lot of the comments were keep it as is, just improve, keep it as is, just improve. And I think there's still a growth opportunity there, in that you can grow as a community and make the community better, but it doesn't necessarily have to be in terms of these other growth metrics that we're so used to using. I think it's time to kind of find other growth metrics and find other ways to grow. But that was like an overwhelming kind of response that I wanted to acknowledge in light of both of those comments.
Regeneration is another word for growth.
Right, exactly. Right.
I think we have to go back to the concept of balance, right? Because we talk about fiber optic coming in, there's a lot of things that we need to do for this town to bring it really to make sure it's, you know, sustainable moving forward from an infrastructure standpoint, but there's cost involved in that, right? So where is that money going to come from? It's either going to be raised taxes if everything stays status quo, or we have to figure out ways of bringing in new tax revenue. So to say totally stay exactly as we are, I mean, I think we have to be somewhat creative on
Right.
how we grow and maintain who we are. So again, it all comes back to balance, but
Right.
you know, we all want what everybody else has. We just need to be able to pay for it.
Yeah, and I think that's where being agile in terms of thinking of different economic models that don't have the footprint, the physical footprint that makes a town physically feel like it's growing is going to be important. And maybe that's where we find the balance. I mean, different businesses, businesses don't look like a big warehouse anymore. A lot of them don't. Some still do, but I think there's so much being done in terms of technology. So what does
Even the
that look
tax
like?
side of things, right? We're from a master planning standpoint. I don't really think we've gotten into the tax side of things,
Right.
but you know, we're a flat tax community. And
Right.
is that something that needs to change if we're going to fund growth through maybe playing with our tax rates?
Right.
Hmm.
Potentially, yeah.
So that,
Please.
now, as some of you know, I was a proponent of that. When you actually sit down and do the numbers, if we were to do a variable tax rate or an uneven split would put an additional pressure on the businesses that we already have. The ratios actually don't work out. It took a lot of trying to comprehend and understand it. But it's based on the simple fact that we don't have enough businesses, which is what we have for residential. You were talking about the housing. To bring in the youth you need and the younger people, you need affordable housing. I know there's not a lot of appetite for, like Marissa said, the affordable housing, but affordable housing isn't the ghettos, it isn't the project.
No,
We just, you know, some of the affordable projects, housing developments that I worked on as a kid, they're nice little 2-3 bedroom houses, split level ranches. And, you know, the government can come in and help and assist with some of the funding.
even mixed use properties. Yeah.
Low income rate, that's the first thing people think, and then when you hear, you know,
No, but you can incorporate mixed use properties, right? Where you have residential, commercial, retail in all the same space, right? And that's gonna draw the youth to come so that they can aggregate together. They have a common space where, you know, their demographic kind of hangs out. But it also brings in retail business as well. So I think we just have to think outside of who we are right now. And if we are gonna increase housing, what is the right type of housing? And, you know, maybe the traditional one house on a lot is really not the right model.
Yeah, also because that uses up more open space. Thinking about using infill.
into the contexts, you know.
Yeah,
I know, depending on what you want to do with the condos, you don't want to, I don't think, see things like what they're gonna be putting in Granby right across from downtown.
oh no, I'm curious about that, to be honest with
Well,
you.
it's gonna be a mixed use thing, so it's gonna
Well,
be housing and tie-ins.
So some of these companies have done it, I mean, we're not a city, we're not like this. They come in and take these malls now and they turn them into self-sustaining communities. Out west, there's like just when Kim and I, when we went to Las Vegas, I mean, my dream is a home out there to escape every once in a while. And what is it, Summerlin? They have incorporated so much into this, like a nice residential area. They open athletics. Farm team is there, the Golden Knights practice facility is there. They have the Red Rock Casino, which the Red Casinos itself. But things like that, like you said, the mixed use communities, you put in similar to the over 55 developments.
Yeah.
Where they have community centers, they have activities to do with things. The activities that were here when I was a kid are gone.
Mhm.
You know, granted, some of them are problematic because you deal with them over at the North Pond area. You know, but those are the things that kids did back then. One of the things I noticed when we first moved back here was when I was a kid, if you got a 20-inch snowstorm, there was snow with that. There's nobody on it. The lake, you know, we've had these weird winters now. So you've got to try and diversify and find the different avenues to grow with. I mean, I know this isn't popular, but one of the things I've thought about is because we have the motocross and we're trying to bring people, I've always thought a smaller base motel area would be it. See, there we go. If Diane Gill agrees, if she doesn't, I'm gonna hear about it. You know, something small, and they're out there now. I mean, you saw the footprint for like the Hampton Inn in Westfield, which was the Holiday Inn Express, and they just kind of redid it. The other thing we can do is for housing is go up, you don't have to go out.
Right.
You don't want to go up too high, the scale will, with their building requirements, they'll come in, but, you can utilize the space that's already been utilized and expand it. These are the types of things you need to look at. I know it's not part of this process, but our downtown area sucks.
But it is part of the process. I mean, it's all about planning for the future, right? And what's it gonna look like?
It's so unsafe. I've seen people crossing from the summer house on the Blind Hill. And there's no convenient or safe access to get across.
Playing Frogger.
I remember with Ken, where I'm like, oh my God, look at this guy's gonna try and cross. He's looking, you can't see over the hill. I know the side, again, all the infrastructure stuff costs, but, there's grants out there for the safety programs and bike trail and bike paths. So some of the things that I focused on are, we don't want to get too big. I know we don't want to be West Springfield, although some people have said we are going to be, so we're going to move out, but.
That is part of it. You want recreation here, you want people to.
Yes, you have to have some.
And fill our economy, you gotta make it safe for them.
And we've got, I guess you'd call it the commercial corridor, keep it there, you know, there's, all those commercial lots are right there. Pretty much if you look at from. I always want to call it Chubb's, but West River Brewery down. You could, there's no houses there anymore, you could completely utilize that. Sidewalks, you know, because we have like magical sidewalks to nowhere, like on Sheep Pasture Road, that crosswalk that goes to nothing. And you need to utilize what we have. If you don't, I mean, really, the plaza on top of the hill should probably be flattened, and something new should be brought in there.
When is our housing focus group?
Oh,
Marjorie?
that, no, it's all for March 9th. Tuesday. If that's.
Tentatively?
All right, someone's coming with the task here.
Is that
Yes.
a moving date?
6 P.M.
That'll be the interesting
And
one.
I'm sorry, that is the 9th.
Yeah.
Can I ask
All right.
a proper question?
I'm sorry.
Proper question. So I just, when I think about strategic planning for my own company, one of the things that's been needed component each time I've done it is to look, do a landscape analysis, like what are the competitors doing, what are other communities doing, what are the states that I work with doing, and to bring all that back and inform it. And I feel like there's a lot of pressure on this town to come up with our own ideas and to kind of start from scratch, but I'm wondering if there's a part of this process where people are actually looking at communities that have similar demographics, whether they're within or outside of Massachusetts, and to see, you know, if they've been in similar stages of development and what their next moves have been, and to look at the evidence of effectiveness in some of that, to bring that back to inform some decision making. Which leads me to my next question, and you don't have to answer this now, but this is, I think, the second or third focus group that I've participated in or observed. And there's a lot, seems like to Marissa's point, there's a lot of input, we've, you know, focus group surveys, etc. But I don't know where the decision making happens. And it's unclear to me, like at some point, there should be like benchmark places where there is decision-making authority by an entity or a group in town or something, and then there's like, it provides direction for the next phase of the planning and a prioritization around what the community goals are, like define that cohesion, and, you know, at least not everyone is gonna agree on everything, but at least we can all agree on here, this is the decision has been made, and now it's, I can live with it, I might not 100% agree with it, I'm a 3 out of 5 on it, but at least I know where we stand here, and let's move forward from this point. And it's not clear to me what the process for that is, so maybe somebody can educate me outside of this forum around that. Or maybe we need to do larger communication across the community about where those decision-making points are. But I think it's important that if you're gonna ask for input, you give feedback along the way to let people know how that input is actually shaping the plan as it moves forward.
I think that's a key ingredient in terms of the planning process, and I speak from experience on that. I was the chair of the subcommittee for the previous master plan that was aborted. And we had a number of projects that actually had support from some folks in the business community. It was basically what I'll call the Carvana property. And we were looking at mixed use development and calling it another, not the village center to usurp our central business, but actually to try to take some pressure off the single house model, a multi-acre model. And we had done everything except bring it actually to the town as a town meeting. And we were told on the committee that the powers that be said this is not gonna fly. And so it never was brought to the town for action. So the key is, in terms of the process we're going through here, it's been much more open and much more inclusive than the process that we had done. That I'm not sure if there's the weight of the town behind it enough to make sure that the powers that be will do buy-in to whatever we come up with. And I think that that has to be explored, exposed, or whatever, so that you could say, okay, we can move these ideas to the next step.
I think we're a bit more vocal of a town now.
I think
too.
so, yeah.
So I think, you know, when something like this gets done and if, you know, knock on wood, goes through town hall, gets voted upon, you know, I don't think there's a constituency, or at least a portion of the constituency, that's just gonna let it sit there and atrophy, right? I think there's gonna be people that are gonna be in the background kind of pushing this along, saying, hey, spent a year and a half putting this thing together. Let's see some fruits of the labor and the investment that everybody put into this. So hopefully the same thing doesn't happen. Hopefully, it gets out of the starting gate
Mhm.
and then the town will rally behind it.
Well, I see the process this year as being much more in-depth and much more inclusive than the process that we had engaged in.
That's all, Marcus.
Back then.
What year was
It's all
that?
Marcus.
It was late 2000, late 1990s.
Oh, wow.
97.
Well, I think our 17-member planning advisory committee
So
has
effective.
certainly pushed everyone forward to keep the lines of communication open, and a key date coming up, May 4th, I believe it is, John. The Planning board will be attending the master plan advisory committee for a in-depth briefing on where the master plan is. So we're going to pull everything together, because in the end, the planning board has to approve this master plan. And then we will have an implementation process, which will go on into 2024. On who's going to do what. That's where the rubber meets the road, and we'll see some changes. And we'll see some interesting things coming out of it. That'll help us get ahead. Move ahead. But I certainly have appreciated the input of all the members of that committee. I mean, our meetings have been not too long, right? Maybe an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours.
We've gotten better. We've gotten better.
An hour is what we shoot for, but we want to make sure everybody has their say.
Right.
Well, Marcus,
No.
You could say it again. Well, thanks, everybody. I think this has been a real fruitful discussion.
Yeah.
Thank you for organizing, John.
Yeah.
You're the linchpin, my friend.